Emma Caldwell and Dr. Aris College seemed destined for a perfect life, An American Bride and Adieu by Dr. Bound by Love, but just hours after their lavish wedding, one secret buried in a DNA test would turn their honeymoon suite into a crime scene, and their fairy tale into a nightmare no one saw coming. Emma Caldwell had always been described as a woman with quiet grace, ambitious, compassionate, and a little too trusting of the world. At 28, she had built a solid career as a travel nurse in Chicago, moving from hospital to hospital, collecting stories and experiences. Her life revolved around helping others heal, but deep down, she longed for a connection of her own, something that felt lasting and real. That connection came unexpectedly during a medical conference in Singapore, where fate introduced her to Dr. Aris Khalid, a trauma surgeon from Dubai. Aris stood out in the crowd of doctors and researchers. He was confident but soft-spoken, his intelligence evident in the way he listened more than he spoke. Emma found herself drawn to his calm energy. They spent hours discussing their work, families, and the long shifts that came with their professions. By the end of the conference, what started as polite conversation turned into an undeniable spark. Aris was captivated by Emma's warmth, the way her laughter filled every pause, and a genuine curiosity about life beyond her own. Their romance unfolded across continents. They texted daily, video, called through time zones, and found ways to meet in different countries when their schedules allowed. Each meeting deepened their bond. Aris introduced Emma to Arabic cuisine, taught her phrases in his language, and showed her photos of Dubai's skyline. Emma shared stories of her childhood, her love for lakeside sunsets, and a dream of having a small family one day. Despite the distance, they began to feel inseparable. When Aris finally brought Emma to Dubai for the first time, the city overwhelmed her, its gold-lit towers, desert horizons, and the scent of oud in the air. His family welcomed her politely, though his mother, Samira, observed her with quiet hesitation. To Samira, Emma seemed too foreign, too independent for her son, but Aris was determined to prove that love transcended borders. Over dinners and family gatherings, he defended Emma's place in his life, and slowly, even his mother softened, impressed by Emma's humility and respect for their traditions. Aris proposed one night on a private yacht, beneath the glittering city skyline reflected on the water. The moment was perfect, emotional, and unforgettable. Emma said yes through tears of joy, and the two began planning a wedding that symbolized their union of cultures, a fusion of American romance and Arabian luxury. In the months leading up to the ceremony, Emma moved to Dubai permanently, leaving behind her Chicago apartment and her circle of friends. She adapted quickly, learning local customs and embracing her new environment. Her social media was filled with smiling photos, brunches, pre-wedding parties, desert picnics, and her caption, "New beginnings under the same sky." Their wedding day arrived in December, under a winter sun that glowed like gold on the horizon. Hundreds of guests filled the grand ballroom of a five-star hotel overlooking the Arabian Gulf. Emma wore an ivory gown embroidered with crystals, while Aris stood beside her in an elegant sherwani, beaming with pride. The ceremony blended two worlds, traditional Arabic music intertwined with soft Western melodies. Cameras flashed, friends cheered, and champagne glasses clinked. To everyone watching, they were perfection. The American Bride and the Adieu by Dr. A love story written in the stars. But behind Emma's radiant smile was a secret she had buried deep, one she promised herself she would share after the wedding, once the timing was right. She didn't know that her silence would become the reason she would never see another sunrise. The night after the grand wedding was meant to be one of celebration and peace, a beginning to a life filled with promise. Emma and Aris had greeted hundreds of guests, endured endless photographs, and danced under golden chandeliers that sparkled like stars. The suite they retired to in their luxury hotel overlooked the glittering skyline of Dubai, the city that had witnessed their love story unfold. As the door closed behind them, the laughter from the wedding faded into silence. For the first time that day, they were finally alone. Emma felt an overwhelming mix of exhaustion and happiness. Every detail of the wedding had gone perfectly: the ceremony, the reception, even the speeches from family and friends. She looked at her husband and thought about how lucky she was. Aris seemed distant but calm, his mind already drifting toward their honeymoon plans in the Maldives. He poured them each a glass of sparkling juice and toasted to a lifetime together. But under the surface, there was something fragile between them, something Emma could feel but couldn't name. For weeks, she had carried a secret that grew heavier each day. Just before flying to Dubai for the wedding, she had taken a home pregnancy test. The result had been positive. She was going to have a baby. At first, the discovery filled her with joy. She imagined Aris's reaction, how happy he would be to know that their love had created new life. She planned to surprise him on their honeymoon, maybe with a small gift box containing the ultrasound photo. But before she could prepare that surprise, curiosity led her to order a prenatal DNA kit online. It was a new kind of test that promised early genetic health screening for expectant mothers. When the email with the results arrived a week before the wedding, Emma hesitated to open it. When she finally did, her heart stopped. The report confirmed her pregnancy, but also included a disturbing line. Paternal DNA does not match the father's sample. She didn't understand it at first, then realization struck like lightning. Months before meeting Aris in person again, she had spent one drunken weekend with her ex-boy friend back in Chicago, a mistake she thought was long forgotten. She had buried the memory, convincing herself that it was meaningless. But now, that single night had resurfaced in the worst possible way. Emma deleted the email, convinced she could move on. She told herself that this child could still be loved, that it didn't matter whose DNA it carried. She believed Aris would never need to know, that the truth could stay hidden forever. But secrets have a way of finding their way into the light. On their wedding night, while Emma showered and prepared for bed, her phone rested on the dressing table unlocked. A soft notification tone chimed an automated email reminder from the DNA testing company, congratulating her on completing the process. The message subject read, "Your pregnancy DNA results are ready." It was short, simple, and impossible to ignore. Aris, glancing over while adjusting his cufflinks, noticed the notification. His curiosity got the better of him. He picked up the phone and opened the email, unaware that within seconds his world was about to collapse. As he scrolled through the report, confusion spread across his face, followed by disbelief. The words were scientific but clear. Emma was pregnant, but the father's DNA did not match his. He stared at the screen, unable to breathe, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. The perfect wedding, the romantic vows, the promises of forever all began to twist into something dark and hollow. By the time Emma stepped out of the shower, Aris was no longer the man she had married that morning. A storm had started to build inside him, silent and deadly, and by dawn it would consume them both. When Emma stepped out of the bathroom, wrapped in a silk robe and humming softly, she noticed something different in the air. The warmth of the suite felt colder, the silence heavier. Aris was sitting at the edge of the bed, phone in hand, his expression unreadable. The soft glow from the screen cast shadows across his face, revealing something sharp behind his calm eyes: suspicion, disbelief, rage. Emma froze for a moment, sensing that something was terribly wrong. She thought he might be exhausted from the long day, but the tension in the room told another story. Aris's thoughts raced in every direction. The email he had just read didn't feel real. He had checked the name, the date, the test results, everything matched Emma's information. The report clearly stated that the DNA of the fetus didn't align with his own genetic profile. For a doctor trained to trust science and evidence, there was no room for denial. He scrolled through the email again, searching for errors, hoping it was a misunderstanding or a mix-up. But the truth was written in the data, cold and undeniable. In that instant, the image of Emma he had built in his mind, the loyal, loving woman who had crossed oceans to be with him, shattered. He felt sick, betrayed in a way that cut deeper than any wound he had seen in his years at the hospital. His mind replayed moments from the past year, her nervous laughter when he mentioned having children, her sudden trips back to Chicago, her excuses about needing time before starting a family. Everything began to rearrange itself into a story he didn't want to believe. Emma tried to speak, asking if he was okay, but Aris barely looked up. He muttered something under his breath, his tone low and distant. She didn't realize he had seen the email, not yet. She smiled weakly, trying to break the silence, but he didn't respond. That night they barely spoke. The air between them thickened with unspoken tension. Aris's eyes followed her every move, studying her as if she were a stranger. When the lights went out, he lay awake beside her, thoughts swirling like smoke. Every vow they exchanged earlier that day echoed in his mind, now poisoned by the suspicion that they had been built on lies. He wanted to confront her, to demand the truth, but another part of him feared what he might hear. Sleep never came. By morning, the warmth of the honeymoon suite had turned into a silent prison. Emma woke early and ordered breakfast, unaware that her world was beginning to crumble. Aris ate nothing. He stared at her with the same calmness he wore in the operating room before a difficult surgery. Later that day, guests noticed a change in him. During brunch, Aris barely spoke. His charming smile was gone, replaced by quiet detachment. Emma tried to ignore it, convincing herself it was post-wedding exhaustion. Friends took photos, congratulated them again, and left the hotel as the sun set. When the night returned, so did the silence. Emma lay in bed, thinking of their future, of the baby she would soon have to explain. Aris stood by the window, looking down at the shimmering city below. Somewhere in his heart, love was fighting against anger, but anger was stronger. He imagined how his reputation would crumble if the truth became public. A respected doctor betrayed on his wedding night, humiliated before both families. At midnight, he turned away from the window, his mind darkened by thoughts he could no longer control. Emma slept peacefully, unaware of the storm beside her. He looked at her one last time and made a choice that would destroy both their lives. By dawn, the fairy-tale marriage that began with laughter and roses would end in a crime that shook two nations. The morning after the wedding was still and unnaturally quiet. The hotel's luxury corridors were lined with flowers from the previous night's celebration, now wilting under the soft hum of air conditioning. Staff moved about the hallways, collecting decorations and trays from the event. Behind one ornate door on the top floor, however, silence lingered too long. The "Do Not Disturb" sign had hung there since midnight, untouched. By early afternoon, it began to draw attention. When the housekeeping staff finally entered the suite, the air inside was heavy, thick with the faint scent of perfume and something metallic beneath it. Curtains were drawn, blocking out the sunlight that had begun to blaze across the Dubai skyline. What they found inside would become the centerpiece of an international tragedy. Emma Caldwell lay motionless on the bed, wrapped in her blood-stained wedding veil. The sheets were disheveled, the bedside lamp knocked over, and shards of glass from a broken perfume bottle glimmered on the marble floor. Her eyes were closed as if she had fallen asleep, but the deep bruising on her neck told another story. The first paramedics arrived within minutes, followed by hotel security and the Dubai police. Cameras from the hallway showed Aris leaving the room hours earlier, dressed in casual clothes, carrying a small travel bag. The timestamp was 3:17 a.m. After that, he vanished. His phone remained in the suite, placed carefully on the desk beside his wedding ring. Investigators found traces of a sedative in Emma's bloodstream, suggesting she had been drugged before being strangled. The medical examiner confirmed she had been pregnant for 8 weeks. The news spread like wildfire. International media seized on the story *, American bride murdered on wedding night in Dubai. * Emma's family in Chicago was notified through the U.S. consulate, their disbelief quickly turning into horror. Her sister, Rebecca, broke down publicly in interviews, pleading for Aris's arrest. The contrast between the fairy-tale wedding photos and the grim details of the murder fascinated and enraged the world. Dubai authorities immediately began a manhunt. At the hospital where Aris worked, colleagues were stunned. He had not shown up for his scheduled shifts, and his office had been cleared of personal items. Security footage from the hotel's parking area showed his car exiting just before sunrise, heading toward the outskirts of the city. The license plate was recorded, but when the car was later found abandoned near the desert highway, it offered few clues. Inside, there was no sign of struggle, only a stethoscope, a bottle of sleeping pills, and an empty passport case. Detectives interviewed his family, but none claimed to know where he was. His younger brother, Hassan, insisted that Aris had been deeply in love and incapable of violence, but police noted inconsistencies in his statements. Friends of the couple told investigators about recent tension between them, though no one imagined it could end like this. Forensic experts combed through every inch of the suite. On the mirror beside the dressing table, faint fingerprints matched Aris's. The DNA on the broken perfume bottle matched both him and Emma, confirming a struggle had occurred. Yet, beyond the physical evidence, there were no clear signs of a plan, no message, no confession, no explanation. By the third day, Interpol issued a red notice for Aris Khalid, marking him as an international fugitive. Airports, ports, and border crossings were alerted. Still, there was no trace of him. Rumors swirled that he might have fled by sea or received help from contacts in the medical community to escape under a new identity. Meanwhile, Emma's body was flown back to Chicago for burial. Thousands watched her funeral live online, her coffin draped with white lilies, the same flowers she had carried down the aisle. The world mourned the woman whose wedding became her deathbed. And somewhere far from the noise of reporters and flashing cameras, the man who once vowed to love her forever had disappeared into the shadows, leaving only questions and a haunting silence behind. Weeks turned into months, and Dubai's once feverish investigation began to cool under the desert sun. The media still ran the story, occasionally grainy wedding photos of Emma smiling beside Aris, headlines screaming about betrayal, and speculation about where the missing doctor had gone. The police searched relentlessly at first, but with no new evidence, the case began to slip into the long list of unsolved tragedies. Still, Emma's family refused to let her memory fade. Her sister Rebecca made sure of it. She stayed in Dubai for weeks after the funeral, attending every hearing, demanding answers, and speaking to every journalist who would listen. Her grief transformed into determination. She believed Aris was alive and hiding, and she wanted the world to keep looking. The first major lead came nearly 3 months after the murder. A construction crew in the Al Qudra desert discovered a white sedan half buried in the sand dunes. It was Aris's car, the same one seen on the hotel's security footage. Inside were a few items: his stethoscope, a blood-stained shirt, and a small envelope. The envelope contained a torn piece of paper with handwriting that read, "Forgive me. It was never supposed to happen." Investigators initially believed it was a suicide note, but the absence of a body told a different story. Footprints around the vehicle led toward a construction site, but vanished shortly after, erased by the shifting sand. Speculation grew that Aris had faked his death. Some theorized he had friends within the hospital system who helped him secure a new identity. Others believed he had escaped by sea through a private charter, perhaps to Oman or farther into Asia. The most disturbing theory came from a journalist named Lena Morty, who began investigating the case for an international crime series. She uncovered bank records showing that Aris had transferred a large sum of money from his due by account to a European bank just days before the wedding. The recipient's name was hidden under a shell company registered in Montenegro. Lena followed the trail relentlessly. She spoke with hospital staff, hotel employees, even the DNA testing company. One night, while reviewing passenger records from private yacht charters, she found a booking under the name Rami Azad, made the morning after Emma's death. The man who boarded the vessel matched Aris's description: same height, same build, even the same scar across his right hand from a childhood accident. The yacht had left Dubai Marina before sunrise, heading toward international waters. It never returned under that name. Despite these findings, no one ever located Aris. Interpol's search extended to Europe and Southeast Asia, but every lead faded into silence. Years passed, and the story became a haunting legend among expatriates in Du, by a reminder of how quickly paradise can turn into a nightmare. Back in Chicago, Emma's family built a foundation in her memory dedicated to helping victims of international crimes. Rebecca spoke at events, her voice steady but hollow, always ending with the same plea: "If he's alive, bring him home. Let justice be done." Then, almost 5 years later, a photograph surfaced online. It was taken in a small town in Romania, a blurry image of a man in a white coat standing outside a rural clinic. The resemblance was striking. Same facial structure, same scar on the hand. The photo spread across social media in hours, reigniting the mystery. Authorities investigated, but the man disappeared before they arrived. No one ever confirmed if it was truly Aris Khalid. Some believed he had died in the desert. Others swore he was still out there, living under a new name, haunted by what he had done. Emma's grave remained a quiet place in Chicago, always adorned with fresh lilies. Visitors often said they felt an inexplicable chill when they stood there, as if the air itself remembered a love that had turned into tragedy, and a secret that refused to stay buried.